nothing of the horrors to come. Give them a glimpse.
Seven years ago, the Coalition released the technical test beta for Gears of War 5. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my reaction and other people's reaction to the tech test were a little bit... We simply just didn't know how to feel about Gears 5 at the moment. Like, mechanically it seemed fine, but it had a few weird, strange changes that just kind of threw us off. You know, we had the 6-shot Nasher, you know, we had new game modes being introduced, such as Arcade, that just didn't seem to be what we expected out of Gears of War. At least it was their way of trying to market to the casuals. And there's nothing wrong with trying to get more casuals into the multiplayer. However, I think the main problem was game modes like Arcade just didn't really translate the best for new players to get into Gears of War, and that doesn't even include the overcomplication of escalation at the time too. It was a very mixed bag, both in the technical test and on release as well, and Gears of War 5 has just always been in this strange position for all of us where it's always so close to being an actual really good game, but it just always falls just that little bit short. And the post-release support patches always changed quite a lot. It took a while for Gears 5 to even get a tuning that it sort of settled on, and even the final tuning was very controversial for a lot of people, especially with some of the delays that were added in. So when you've been stuck with that title for 7 years, you know, you really do hope that the next title is showing a lot more promise than Gears 5 did in its first technical test. And I have to say, I am very excited to show you guys and ladies exactly what I was able to experience last week. It is absolutely incredible.
I like it in here. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
No! What? You can get up there? That's insane.
It's good though. I'd prefer not having it.
He wasn't
oh my
waiting.
god!
He wasn't. So to start off with, we only had 2 play sessions of Versus come last week. We had one Thursday morning and Friday afternoon. That's all I had. And when I'm, you know, doing it between work, there's only so many hours you can get in. So this is only 4.5 hours of gameplay. And first impressions come in. You feel like an absolute tank. But you've still got a little bit of speed to you. The animations just really pull off how heavy of a character you really are. Like the animations when you like go into cover, you go into like a car, your car tilts, you know, you really have this like impact each time you just nudge into a wall. And the new animations that come in with the foot stepping into animations help out so much, not just for readability, but just making the game feel more responsive. You know, one of my major gripes with Gears 5 when the movement became a lot more slower was how slow the slide was. And a slow slide to cover isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when the animation doesn't look right with it, it gives you this massive disconnect. And on E-Day, I just never once had that issue. Like, yes, you can bounce. You can wall bounce just fine in this game. You can't height bounce, whether. You can wall cancel, but don't expect any weird Gears 3 or crazy Gears 5 shenanigans coming in with that. You know, it's more of a, I suppose you could say, kind of like a Gears 1 bounce. You know, if you treat it with no wall cancel, at least that's what I did. You know, you kind of like let yourself hit the wall. You kind of realize that there's still a lot more outplay potential when it comes to movement. Now, once again, this is only within 4.5 hours of playing, and it's very possible come the beta release on August 6th, you know, it might feel a bit better. You know, maybe people might figure some kinks out, but with the first few hours I played, the movement felt spot on. It generally did. I just absolutely loved how important positioning felt again. And, you know, this comes from someone who's been playing Delta Online for like the past couple of months, and yeah, you know, Gears 3 based movement, you know, positioning isn't really rewarded that much. And I'll put my hands up and say, you know, Gears 3 has its shenanigans. That, like, you know, translated to 4 and a little bit of 5 as well. A little bit. Just from having that ancestral sort of flow with the games. But I think they've nailed it. I generally think they've nailed it here. And a lot of this new movement tech is owed to the new verticality reintroduced into the game. We haven't really seen this much verticality since Gears of War Judgment, and the new map design is such a great showcase of this. You know, you have the new jumping tech. You can mantle from a lot higher than you used to, just from right there, and that clip. You know, you just wouldn't expect someone to climb up that high anymore. You know, there's a lot more paths you have to consider now, and the flow of the maps are just going to be absolutely insane. Like, there's no way you can port, let's say, Gridlock back as it is. Like, what do? Like, you mantle on top of the fans and then go on top of the watchtower for long shot? Like, no one's gonna do that. Like, it just isn't gonna work. But so map design is so important with these new mechanics, and it just makes the game feel a lot more fresh. So just to get it out the way, we was able to play 2 maps in the beta. Sorry, in the preview, apologies. One was called Market and one was called Outpost. The current clips you've been seeing have mainly been Outpost, but Market is such an outstanding map from the few hours that I was able to play. Like, it's actually one of those maps where I think to myself, oh yeah, this is a banger. And it really does a good job of having a good mix of verticality and also that traditional flat style symmetrical Gears of War maps that you're used to. And it's one of those things that you need to play to get a feel of. And on the discussion of maps, the 2 maps that we were playing seemed quite big at first when looking at the map overviews. And my main concern was, are these too big for 4v4? But after playing them, honestly, they're actually not. With how fast you can actually get across the maps due to sliding, covers, the different access points you can do in terms of mantling, it's actually not that difficult to get around the maps, and they seemed quite well sized. And if you play one of the new modes like Conquest, which is essentially a natural adaptation of Control from Gears 5, where the point moves around the map is never going to feel too big, in my opinion. Now, once again, this was from 4.5 hours of playtime, so my opinions may change once I play a lot more competitively, you know, or more in pubs come August 6th or release. But honestly, the more I played the maps, the more smaller they felt than from what they initially seemed. And if we're going to talk about things that misled me, the 6-shot Nasher. I'm going to be honest, when I first saw it in the previews, all that PTSD from the Gears 5 tech test and Gears 5 launch started flooding back into my head. I absolutely detested the 6-shot Nasher. For those who can't remember, essentially the 6-shot Nasher worked like, if you got a grey active, it would reload free, but if you got a Y active, it would reload all 6 shells. It just felt off. And with Gears 5 initially being 5v5, 6 shots just never felt enough. You always felt like you was running out by the time someone else was coming around the corner. Now, we are back to 6 shots, but all the reload mechanics, completely different now. So for those who were observant, the Nashers now shell by shell as akin to, like, you know, COD. You know, you can reload 3 shells, click reload, or R in my example, being on mouse and keyboard, and it will stop at 3. I could reload 4 and do the same, reload 5, reload 1 if someone else is coming, and just hope to play for the one shot before he one-shots me down. And just being able to top it up naturally, and with the game being 4v4, the 6-shot Nasher is warming up to me a little bit more than it did in the tech test. Now, once again, I still need to play a lot more, but I'm not as opposed to it as I used to be. It definitely feels like with the new reload mechanic, it has a place. But once again, the 6 shots from the 4 hours that I played didn't feel too bad. Once again, opinions might change, but honestly, I warmed up to it quite quickly, which surprised me. And as we are talking about all these new mechanics being added in, mantle and dodge being on separate buttons now is incredible. And by that I mean when it comes to cover as well, especially when it comes to dodge. So if any of a Gears game, you could accidentally roll off cover. You can't do that anymore unless you specifically click the dodge button. And mantle now having its own dedicated button just means that you're never going to accidentally mantle anymore. Which is just, oh, it's so much better in terms of playability. And just having the game work the way that you expect it to. I mean, it's just those small things. It's going to mess with your muscle memory a little bit. I'm not going to lie. You know, I had to change my key bindings a few times, but it's right on the money. And with all these new key binds, basically there's no more roadie run delay. It basically plays as akin to the shooter control scheme from Gears of War 5. Now, I don't play controller. I've evolved past controller. I don't need to use it anymore. I don't need to use sticks anymore. But if you are still on sticks, which is completely fine, it's now left analog to run. So I can't go too much into detail about how controller feels. There's going to be another YouTuber that's probably going to be a lot better to listen to in regards to that. All I could talk about is mouse and keyboard. And mouse and keyboard felt great in this game once you got used to the new buttons that have been added in for those, well, for mantle and jump. They're the 2 big mechanics that you need to consider. And, you know, you need to make sure you map them correctly because you don't want to accidentally input a jump when you're trying to run away from someone. I mean, it might come up, but it's... I've done it, accidentally done it a few times, and it can catch you out because you can't shoot while jumping.
Now, if there is something controller related I can talk about, it is the PS5 controller. The PS5 controller has full support on PC with full button prompts. The gyro aim is built into the game and is fully supported with the DualSense, and haptic triggers. It's always great to see official controller support at this level, especially with the introduction of gyro. I think gyro aim is going to be a big changer. Hope to see more in the future. Anyway, moving quickly on. There are a few mechanics that are missing, which kind of surprised me. The first thing is there's no more meat shields. I can't pick up a dude like down anymore. This threw me off a little bit for about 2 rounds on a game. You adapt to it quickly, but it's a shame because it's been a staple since Gears 2. Another staple gone from Gears 2 is chainsaw battles. You can't chainsaw battle anymore. I don't know why they got rid of the duels. It just seems so iconic now. I don't know, but it's definitely missing. And you can't grenade tag anymore either. You can't grenade tag players. You can't grenade tag walls. Why? Not too sure. Are they good changes? Are they bad changes? We'll see how things go on. I'm going to miss them. And I think having these staples removed is a shame. But what can we do? Except ask for them to be added back. Add them back, please, Coalition. Cheers. But like I said, the multiplayer was fun, even with these missing. I was having fun. And, you know, with 5 hours
and new toy syndrome and playing something fresh. A lot of the fun is also going to be attributed to that, and you need to take some of what I'm saying with a pinch of salt in regards to some of my enjoyment, right? Like, I got invited early, you know, there's a bit of excitement behind that, you know, all those things add up to a potential bias. Let's be real here. But I also can't say I didn't have fun. I had a lot of fun, and I am very excited to see where Gears of War E-Day ends up at for the multiplayer. Also, very quick public service announcement. Flashbangs are gone. They're now concussion grenades, and they're now a pickup. Satan has been defeated. The evil in the whole world is gone. There is world peace now. We no longer have to worry about dreaded flashbangs. Thank God. On the topic of the concussions, they still have a bit of a visual impaired effect, but you can still shoot. It doesn't stun you outright. It just makes it a little bit harder to see, and you can't ADS. But you still have full capabilities of fighting back. Good enough for me. No complaints whatsoever. Brilliant. Oh, and also stims are back, which is cool. Who doesn't like stim grenades? Hey. So, here's the thing with me and Horde. I've never been a massive Horde fan in the previous titles. Never say I hated it. It is a lot of fun, but 50 Waves was always such a huge commitment that I just could never fully really just stick with. So Horde's not really my forte, and what I can add to my experiences from Siege might not be the most credible, but I at least want to talk about experiences and how much I did enjoy it. So the main thing is that classes are back. You got Assault, Breacher, Marksman, and Medics. Each class has their own different roles, different unlocks, and different tactical gears. The tactical gears just vary on a base to base. You know, Assault has, you know, they release a solar pulse. You know, it stuns enemies around you. You know, Medics can heal from a distance. Marksman's, they can do basically what's equivalent of a wall hack, so you can see your enemies within the recent vicinity, and you know, through walls. And then you've got Breacher, that basically gives them the stim, that helps them heal quicker and reduce incoming damage for a brief period of time. Each character has all their own unlocks, progression, and also different weapon loadouts. So some weapon loadouts are shared. The weapon loadouts are essentially what you spawn in with when you start a Siege game. And each weapon can have its own weapon mod. Weapon mods are basically akin to attachments from Gears of War Tactics, and they all have their benefits. So, for example, you might have a weapon mod that makes the Lancer have more ammo when you do a perfect reload. You could change the actual active bonus that you're given from, you know, increased bullet damage from an FMJ to incendiary rounds, or maybe just faster rate of fire. Yeah, they all have their own benefits. Some even have drawbacks. For example, you can get a snub that makes it into a two round burst, but because of that, it's going to have a bit more recoil, and it's not going to be as accurate long range. So there's just things you got to consider, and not all of them have a trade-off, but some do, and it just adds a little bit of extra depth in the game mode. And not to mention as well, in terms of how you get the attachments, you get them with weapon parts, and weapon parts are obtained while playing Siege. So, how do you obtain these weapon parts for progression? Well, I'm glad you asked, Timmy. Essentially, Horde Siege is an objective-based mode. You land on a pretty sizable map, and it has multiple side objectives and a main objective. So, as long as you do the main objective, you can extract at any point on a helicopter. And doing the side objectives award you with weapon parts. And these weapon parts, as you've seen, are used to mod your weapons or unlock more mod attachments for those weapons. In terms of what the side objectives can be, it can be like kill a high value target, like you've seen here. Like, we're going to kill these like bile toads to basically get these weapon parts that we need. And it could also be like an escort mission, it could be defend this area mission. There's plenty of different variety of side objectives you can do. And when you get the weapon parts, you need to extract to basically carry them over. If your squad gets wiped at any point before you extract, you don't extract with the weapon parts, so you can't mod your weapons. That's basically a big part of the gameplay loop for Siege. And what makes Horde Siege so much more dynamic over the original Horde is the simple fact that it's 3 squads of 4. So there's 12 people on the map at any given time doing their own objectives, and you could run into them, you can help them with their objectives, they can help you with your objectives, and you also get sort of like these world bosses. So these world bosses come with their own negative modifier. So these negative modifiers can be, I've already seen 2 so far, and that can be no perfect reloads or no extraction. So when you're playing on the higher difficulties, we could only play on rookie for the preview, and I believe there's 2 higher difficulties that come after that. So if you're playing on those of the higher difficulties and you can't extract, and you're doing all these side objectives, you know, getting all these weapon mods, and you're like, you're on the brink of basically struggling to get out of the map, then yeah, it's gonna be a challenge to fight like a massive corpse, or like stopping you from even leaving the game. And it's just a cool idea. The preview had 2 bosses. We had a Brumac and a Corpser. I didn't run into any others, but that doesn't mean there probably isn't more. I just had limited game time last week, so I was very happy to see the 2 that we did. I am very excited to see what others might be coming in the future. Maybe we post update reports, and maybe there's more I didn't see. And just to add, you have 3 essential ways that you get to experience Horde in Gears of War E-Day. And it's basically Siege, which is your standard length missions. Blitz are like shorter, bite-sized version of Siege, where you have maybe like 1 or 2 objectives that you can do, and then you extract. And then finally you have one just called Horde, and I think this is based on more on the classic experience of Horde. Now, we wasn't able to try it for the preview, so I don't know if it uses any of the multiplayer maps, or if it would even have a fabricator similar to Gears of War 4 or 5, or any tower defense sort of mechanics, such as that was introduced in Gears of War 3. But there is a classic-like experience that will be there for launch, so it's just something to keep note of. And hopefully it satisfies the people's needs. We're just going to have to wait and see on that one. So the PC version is quite, well, it's what you would expect from the Coalition at this point. You know, ever since Gears of War 4, they have done a very good job at their PC versions of games. You know, I don't want to be beating a dead horse, but Ultimate Edition support was absolutely dreadful. However, you know, I'm very happy with the status quo of Gears of War E-Day having a tremendous amount of options for the end user. Ludicrous video settings were disabled for the beta, and so was frame gen. And this is before a game-ready driver. The day I'm recording this voiceover, a game-ready driver for Gears of War E-Day has come out. So I don't want to speak about performance too much right now, because there's still a lot that can change between now and launch. It's like 4 months. But even knowing that there's going to be some potential gains to be seen here in the next couple of months, just having access to the benchmark, it's always such a nice thing to have. It's always just cool to just have something you can compare other PCs with, to see where you might be getting bottlenecked, if you're getting CPU bottlenecked or GPU bottlenecked. And I'm just glad that they've basically made it a staple in Gears, like all the Gears titles on PCs. Because I don't know if you like ever noticed, but a lot of games just don't have benchmarks these days, and it's sort of become a bit of a dying art. So I do love to see it. And just look at that. Keep an eye on my rig here. You know, I'm on a 7600X, you know, 4080 Super and 32 gigs of RAM, a DDR5, and I'm getting about. It's very easy to get like 60 frames at a 4K with DLSS on dynamic. So it's not native 4K because DLSS is doing its magic, but I can get 60 and it's more than playable. If I was to put DLAA on, so just have it on native, it would be about the 30 to 34 range. Now, once again, we're a couple of months from launch still, so there's probably a lot of performance that can still be squeezed out. I don't expect it to be too different, but it's definitely something I want to revisit come the beta test next week. And also in regards to launch in particular, because launch is what's important. Stability at launch is what we care about. If a beta crashes, that's fine. But you know what? Betas are meant to crash. We're there to find bugs, to help the studio make the game be more polished by the time it comes out. So I'm all for it. I'm all for bug catching. I'm all for doing all that. I'm all for running into a wall looking for cover issues. You know, I'm all for that. But yeah, quite so far, I'm I'm personally happy with the performance. When it came to multiplayer, if I actually disable the frame rate cap, well, it only goes up to 120 currently at the moment. There is no unlimited frame rate cap for some reason. Probably an early build thing. Once again, not really harping too much on it. I could probably get about like 80 frames if I put my target frame rate on 90, and that's more than enough for multiplayer. But if you're on an older system, especially, you know, if it's getting on a few years now and you really want to play EA, unfortunately, it probably is worth looking to do an upgrade for this game. And it kind of sucks to say that because of how hardware prices is currently, but Unreal 5, baby. The game looks beautiful. It's gonna need some extra juice, so just keep that in mind. Oh, and there's no FOV slider. Coalition, please fix.